All right, we're in Luke 16 this morning. A couple of review comments on 15, and we'll be at 16 and try to get into 17. This is kind of I'll comment about that in a minute. Let's get the review stuff done first. All right, last time we talked about it been last Sunday, since we had singing. We didn't have singing Wednesday night because of the weather. The parable of the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the lost son. Quickly on those, 100 sheep, he lost one. He went and found it, left the 99. And the big point is the rejoicing. There's rejoicing, great joy when one sinner repents, just like he had joy when he found his sheep. Same thing with the coin. The lady had 10 coins. She lost one. She lights a lamp, she sweeps, and she finds that one lost coin, and there's great rejoicing over that. And it's just the angels rejoice when a sinner repents. And then the man with the two sons, the father representing God, waiting on the prodigal to come back, and then the one who went and wasted his living and then really found himself, we'll get to it in a minute, and came back, versus the older son who had been there all along but had a really rotten attitude about it, as it turns out. So that's the young man that lost all of his inheritance that he had. The text says he came to himself. He realized his condition and ready to make the change. So goes to his father, goes back to his father, and recognizes his situation and has this little speech made about sin, and I'll come back as a hired hand type thing. And we talked about then the repentance and things that's involved with that, whatever. So the father's waiting, watching, actually runs out to meet him. The father does, anxious for him to come back, help him out what he can there. He puts the robe on him, and my dead son is now alive, whatever. But then we got the older brother who, without coming in, because of the rejoicing when the son had come back, no forgiveness there. The father goes out to see him, which again is important, to try to get him to come in, and he would not do it. Not understand mercy and forgiveness at all. And the point we made at the end of this is, God's not enough blessings to everybody. Everybody can come in. It's just up to your attitude, how you want to be with that. So I'm going to go to my father. The father's watching, and they're rejoicing. That's the 3 points that we kind of wound up with at the end. All right, that was really quick. Luke 16. Luke 16. Luke 16 focuses on various issues related to possessions and wealth and materialism. And there's some very familiar parts of it, like the rich man and Lazarus. It's in the last part of Luke 16. Everybody's very familiar with that. But to me, there's also some very challenging points in Luke 16. For example, look at verse 9. If you got it open there. I say to you, make friends of yourselves an unrighteous mammon. And we'll get to a minute about what mammon is, but most everybody knows it's wealth or riches or gain. So make friends of yourselves of unrighteous mammon, that when you fail, they may receive you into an everlasting home. Now, what's unrighteous mammon got to do with an everlasting home? So when we get there, somebody can tell me. All right. And then there's a verse stuck in there, and look at verse 18, it kind of in the middle of this whole thing, like it kind of stuck in there where Jesus says, whoever divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery. Who marries her who is divorced commits adultery. What's that got through this chapter? Just like it's kind of stuck in there. How does it fit in the flow? So we're going to try not to get buried down in a lot of unnecessary details, and yet we will try to see the lesson that Jesus is trying to make, particularly to these rich Pharisees that are there. And then, of course, how that might apply to us there. So when we get to this first parable, the unjust servant, it's usually called, or unrighteous steward, different names. Let's get 2 or 3 characters in mind first. You got the rich man, who had the master who had the wealth, and it would represent God in the parable as done. And then the unrighteous steward, or the unjust servant, as it's called here, would be these scribes and Pharisees, those who thought themselves righteous. And then, they just stuck together, sorry. Then you got these accusations that are brought against this servant. And we don't know about the accusations, really, other than this. He had been accused of doing something bad for his master. Don't know who made it. Was it one of the merchants he was buying goods from? Was it another servant? Who told on him? Where did it come from? We don't know. But in the parable, it represents all the protests that the prophets from times past have made against the Jews, their unrighteous leaders. So the accusations are there. And of course, Christ comes and brings message against them that's opposite their thing toward the end. And then the day of accounting is coming. Of course, Christ had come back. And the Jews have got to answer to him, and they're not. The scribes and Pharisees are ignoring him pretty much so. And then you got the lowering of the bills. We'll get to that in just a minute. And think about there is this the corruption that the Jewish leaders have done to the law of Moses. They started changing the law around. And so the judge servant gets kicked out. Well, Israel's fixed to be removed too from being God's chosen people. So there's several parallels that kind of lead through here that to me are sometimes hard for us to normally see as we go through there. So let's look at this parable of unjust servant a minute. It's addressed to the disciples group overall, not just the apostle, not just the select ones. Of course, the disciples, anyone who's a follower or a learner, going after Jesus, big crowds there. It's also the Pharisees were there, probably the publicans and tax collectors had been all along with this in these groups. But then in verse 14, we see that specifically that the Pharisees were there listening to this comments that he made here. So this steward is accused of taking money or giving a false management of the man's money. According to which translation you're reading, whether it's a manager and management of the estate, or whether it's a steward and a servant, whatever the terms that are used are a little bit different there. 1 Corinthians 4, verses 1 and 2 says, let a man so consider us as servants of Christ and stewards of the riches of God. Verse 2, moreover, it's required in stewards that they be found faithful. You don't want somebody working for you and managing your money, your property, or whatever. That's not faithful. That's exactly what this guy here is accused of. 1 Peter 4:10, each one's received gift, minister it to one another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. So we have directions for us as we manage what God has given us on earth to be good stewards of it. And that's some of the lesson we're going to get from this parable here this morning. He's accused of this thing. The word accused, it's a very strong term. It's the way it's used here in the text. No sympathy, even perhaps animosity is involved in it. Whoever brought this accusation against him, defined as slander or defaming the person, to be a false charge. There's nothing said here about whether it's true or false. It's just the way the man reacted to it. He didn't try to defend himself. Yeah, I'm guilty of it, or no, I'm not guilty of it. He just took it and went and prepared because it seemed like the inevitable was there. He's going to be terminated from his job. So he had to give an account for it there. The message is designed to stress the need for responsibility, proper attitude toward the use of all things given to our possession, complete loyalty to the master. Keep in mind, don't just think the literal parable, make the application to us and our master and how we handle what he's given us. Jesus wants us all to realize everything we have in this life is entrusted to us by God, to use on his behalf. It's given by God, it belongs to God, still belongs to him, and be returned to God at our passing. We won't take anything with us. Whatever God's given us on this earth to deal with, it's ours to handle, and we don't take anything with us. If you listen to Steve's radio program this morning, he kind of got into that same point with this morning. Principal lesson of the story and the chapter, that's the point. The whole chapter ties together, even though you may not see the thread that goes through there, which involves a folly of worldly materialism and the love of money. That's exactly what he had done. Is difficult to determine, but it's ultimately involved acting on his own best interests rather than those of the master. So therefore, he was unworthy in his stewardship because of the way he had acted with it there. So the steward is ashamed. He's ashamed. He ashamed. He's ashamed. He's not ashamed of the fact of what he had done. That's never said. Never said he's ashamed of that. But the humiliation is coming from it. The fact he got caught and the embarrassment is what he seems to be ashamed of. He said about being ashamed of that. So there's no true sign of repentance or remorse. That's not mentioned anywhere here. Just more scheming. Something must be done and done quickly. He makes no appeal to save his present job. That doesn't seem to be an option. Jesus did not say the steward even spoke to his master, offered an explanation that would deny the charges. Instead, he went to work in an effort to mitigate the consequences of his action. Seems like all he's worried about is, what am I going to do down the road? Not trying to prove myself innocent here or anything along those lines. So the steward makes preparation. And the word said he done it quickly. He's about to lose his job. So he wants something done to cover him here. So he starts trying to win the favor of those who can help him out when this time comes. Probably spend, we got two examples he gave here. We don't know how many people owed the master money. There's only two examples given here. But one of them is of the man who owed him olive oil. Between 800 and 900 gallons. I think the NIV actually says 900 gallons when it puts it in the text there. That'd be the yield of about 150 olive trees. Steve mentioned the other day, he said, I saw Megan. Shirley said, well, no, y'all didn't hear that. That's in his Romans class. He was saying that the other night. Was watching on the YouTube. But Shirley said, I don't know if he saw a million or not. That's kind of like an exaggeration to me. But anyhow, a million olive trees. But this would be what it would take about 150 olive trees to produce in a year's time. So it's a lot of olive oil, and very important to them. They used it. Did a little calculation. I looked at the JerusalemGiftShop.com, the Holy Land Kitchen page on there, and on there 1.5 liter can of olive oil sells for $70. Multiply all that out, get the gallons, and times 800 gallons, you got about $140,000. This man owed his master in our money. So not an insignificant amount of money there. So he's preparing to write the thing down and get it down to where he win that man's favor. So when I'm out of a job, I can go to him and he'll have some friendship there. What I do for you, looking for a favor in return. The phrase that's used there is that they may receive me or welcome me into their houses. That's what he's after. That when I'm out of a job, they'll welcome me into their house. In other words, he's putting together a scheme here that the debtors who owed his master, he had done them so much favor when he's fired, that he could go live with them or get food for them, or maybe even go to work for them, or who knows what, but they were going to give him the favor he needed to get it back, favor in return. And he's commended by his master. This is the strange kind of part of the story here. He's commended by his master, not for the wrongdoing, but for the preparation he made because of it after his dismissal. And that seems a little strange if this man is doing wrong, but the master recognized that the steward had thoughtfully and diligently, so he commended him, praised him for his qualities. Commendation of the master did not alter or justify the unrighteous character and deeds of the steward, but it didn't pardon his faults. He's not saying, what you did wasn't wrong, but he just recognizing the fact that he went out and prepared for the time was coming. So Jesus in the parable calls him an unjust servant or unjust steward. Unjust. The word actually means unrighteous or dishonest. That's the term that's used in the NIV if you read through it. The Lord used the same term. Listen, this is interesting. Unjust servant. The same word that's used when Jesus said in Luke 13, "Depart from me, you workers of iniquity." Same word there. Jesus purchased the field with the reward of iniquity, money he'd gotten from the chief priest. Peter said to Simon in Acts 8, "You're in the gall of bitterness and the bond of iniquity." Same word that's used here to describe this unjust servant. So he was definitely wrong in what he had done there. He was the son of this world, it's called. Jesus revealed the master's response. He provided a broad generalization of his own. The message had been given because worldly people are sometimes wiser than God's people, it says. Some other things that are strange about reading through this parable. He actually says, Jesus says that the worldly people are more astute or more wise than the than children of God are in the way they handle some things here. They use better judgment. Those identified with material existence, the things, the children of the sons of this world, are focused on the here and now. So therefore, they're going to take care of the here and now. They're clever and shrewd. They expect to inherit only what this world offers. They live in their generation without regard to what's to come. Children of God, on the other hand, live for the hereafter. And even though they may enjoy many worldly pleasures here, righteousness, they look for what it's got to come, not beyond out there. So it kind of brings us to what kind of preparation are we making? It's kind of the whole point of this thing for how we handle material things on this earth, not to gain for ourselves here like these unrighteous Pharisees and scribes are doing, but how do we prepare and what do we do to us to prepare for the world to come? Philip Owens got a book that kind of goes along with Bob Waldron's Servant of Jesus book. Philip says, use your possessions wisely for spiritual good. When it fails you, if you have no more or you don't need any more because you die, you should put what you got now for good because at some point you're not going to have it. It won't matter to you. You'll be dead. You can rest assured that God in heaven will accept you. So Jesus makes 2 points overall, he says. They use the same diligence and shrewdness that earlier used in the world interest in spiritual matters. So don't just, the same quickness and urgency in which this unjust steward went after preparing for his future, we need to do the same thing preparing for our future, not with the worldly gain here, but use what we have in the worldly material matters to prepare for the future. So how does it relate to us? What do we do with that? Well, go think about Matthew 25. In the judgment scene there, what did Jesus say to those people there? You saw me sick and hungry and all these other things and naked and you clothed me. But he said, you didn't do it to me, you did to who? To people, to those around you here. So kind of what's the point here? We take our material gains, the whole chapter is about materialism and worldly gains and things. We take what we have materialistically and we use it to lay up for ourselves treasures in heaven, not here like the unjust steward was, but he's preparing himself. The whole point of the thing is he saw the need to make preparation and do it quickly. So we need to say the same thing. We take material matters we have here and make preparation also. We do that by doing good to others and lay up treasures in heaven with what we have here materially. Does that make sense? Everybody kind of see what I think the point he's trying to get to here with all that. So he was an unjust servant. He was full of iniquity, but with that. So comments from anybody on that little part there? I'll stop here. 2 or 3 times, it kind of breaks into sections here. So I did want to read this little piece on verse 9. It's kind of semi-long, but verse 9 was that, and I read to start with. That was kind of troubling. Like, is that the legitimate use to be made of the physical blessings God has given us. However, just as the steward was in charge of the master's goods, so God has given into our hands some physical possessions. I was just kind of talking about. Jesus says that our life's goal should be to make yourselves friends of or with the things that we have. Use what we have given to do good, show kindness, offer charity, bestow love, extend sympathy toward others. Jesus implores us to use our earthly goods in view of eternity and eternal spiritual well-being, our eternal dwelling I'm trying to get out. We should do it in order that when you fail, same words he used for this person here, that you may receive you into everlasting habitations. That is, when mammon fails, our earthly gains fail, we've got it laid up that we can use it from there in the future. So that's the summarizes, I think, what verse 9 and the entire thing is really trying to get across to us there. Then it says, who is faithful in least will be faithful in much, and who is unjust in least will be unjust in much. Now, just think about that as far as our daily lives concerned. If you're going to give, you don't start out when your kids are little and earning an allowance, get them $50 a week, right? Well, you want to learn how to do first. Take care of the smaller amounts and learn how to handle that. And it's not the same thing here with us. You're faithful in least, you handle that little bit, and you can get more. The guy who had 2 talents, 5 talents, 10 talents, whatever, and he worked and gained more. But he didn't have that. He wasn't given the big number to start with. He worked and worked himself up to that by proving himself faithful in that. That's kind of the idea behind this. But you might also then say, okay, how does that apply? Well, he was still little, was still much. And you take any number of examples you want to there and work them into this thing of attitudes and things like that. Little and much are human terms, not divine terms. The value of things from an earthly perspective does not change in responsibility to God. It places on the individual that uses it properly. I mean, God's given us what we have. That's part of the point of this whole chapter here. He's given it to us for us to use and use it properly. God thinks the little things is important. It's equaling that which seems to be more significant. We see them as less important, and therefore we take our responsibility toward them more lightly. Oh, if I've got this much to manage, I got to pay my attention to it. If I've got this much, no big deal. No, God says you be faithful in this and you'll get more. Okay. So, how do we handle possessions that are entrusted to us? The question comes in then. Well, how many of you have responsibilities at work where you're able to spend money, company's money, buy various things? I mean, up to how many servers and computers and related things I bought over the years. So how do I handle that company money? Just like it was mine? I mean, do I spend it frivolously or whatever? So look at verse 11. Chapter 6, verse 11. Therefore, if you have not been faithful in unrighteous mammon, who will commit your trust to true riches? If you haven't been faithful in unrighteousness, who's going to let you handle the true riches of life over there? We cannot expect God to give us the greater spiritual blessings if we've not been faithfully discharging our duties for the lesser or material things God's given us. We're stewards of everything we have now, God gave it to us. He expects us to manage it well. Okay? And that's how we expect him to give us then the spiritual blessings that are even greater than what we have now. In verse 12, if you've not been faithful in what is another man's, God's in this case, who will give you what is your own? The things we possess, the responsibilities we have to them are all entrusted to us by God. We are thus obligated to God to use them properly. Possession is not ours by natural ownership. We're only stewards. We're expected to be faithful, that is trustworthy, and dealing with them. We must act conscientiously, so we please the one who entrusted them to us, and who still owns them. They're just ours entrusted to us. Therefore, they're owned by another or belong to another. We handle them well. The material things, possessions, God will trust us greater blessings, and we'll be blessed each. You've not been faithful in what's expected to be faithful in what is more. Is the thing there. So it kind of sums this down into this familiar part of one of the familiar parts of it here, when he says that you can't be masters. We've all heard that part of this chapter. Either you're going to love the one and hate the other, or you're going to be true to one and despise the other. And the two things here you're looking at is God and mammon. And mammon is this riches or gain. Now, go back to the unjust servant. To the master of the unjust servant. They didn't say how he got his money. Nothing wrong with the riches there. We'll get a rich man Lazarus in a minute and talk about that. And the rich man, nothing was said about how the rich man got his money or anything about that. It's how he used it. That's the whole point of the parable of rich man and Lazarus there. So the true point here is it indicates that true heartfelt loyalty of the servant must be made. You decide it can be devoted to one, and the other can be going to be disappointed. So are you going to disappoint God, or are you going to disappoint Satan? I saw an article this week that just jumped right into this thing here. In the article, there's an incredibly large group of people here. And God's up front, and Satan's up front. And people are coming and joining with either Satan or with God. Kind of remind me of choosing up teams on an athletic field, I take you. So they're coming to them. And so the crowd is eventually all the crowd's on one side or the other, and so they leave. Except there's one guy sitting on the fence back here. He's trying to straddle the fence. And then Satan comes back and says, "What are you doing on the fence?" He says, "Well, I don't know which way." Satan said, "The fence belongs to me." If you're straddling the fence, it belongs to Satan. So the same thing with this. I thought you can't serve both of them. We got to get off the fence. We can't serve our earthly riches and serve God at the same time. Can we have earthly riches? Sure we can. But it's how we use them here. 1 John 2:15. Love not the world. Either things in the world. If a man loves the world, love the Father is not in him. Can't have both. All right, another break point. Thoughts from anybody about all this? So the Pharisees respond to all this. Verse 14. Pharisees who were lovers of money, it says, the Pharisees who were lovers of money heard these things, and they derided him. They derided him. Verse 15. He said to them, "You are those who justify yourself before men. God knows your heart. What's highly esteemed among men is an abomination to God." What's highly esteemed among men is an abomination to God. So their self-justification was more than a facade. It was a farce. They depended upon the appearance of their good deeds to cause men to think they were virtuous and righteous in God's sight. We've got the parables that illustrates that. The righteous deeds and prayers were tainted because they were done to be seen of men. Our purpose is to glorify God and not necessarily to gain the praise of men. We can't have both. You can't please God and have the praise of men at the same time. So they derided him. Various things, they scoffed at him, sneered at him. That's how they acted toward Jesus at the end of this parable. Why? The little thing is they got to step on their toes, right? Big time stepping on. You might say stomping on their toes. A little better. Self-justification, what they were trying to do. Self-justify themselves with this. Two passages here. This is in thinking about God in our hearts and seeing what we're doing. 7 verse 9, for the righteous God tests the hearts and minds. In 139, you have searched me and known me. You know my sitting down, my rising up. You understand my thoughts afar off. You comprehend my path, my lying down, and acquainted with all my ways. God knows what's in our hearts. He knows when we're using our talents or our money or whatever for his benefit, to please him, as opposed to for our own self-righteous stuff like the Pharisees were. So verse 16 then, again, this kind of seems to be, okay, why is he changing gears here? Well, he's not really, if you look at it. He says, the law and the prophets from John, since that time the kingdom of God's been preached, and everyone's pressing into it. In verse 16. So, well, I got a scroll there of like the law and the prophets. The law and prophets served their purpose up at this point. But what's happening now? Until John came and started preaching the kingdom, right? And people are moving toward the kingdom. What people are doing, they're coming to John, repenting, being baptized by John. When Jesus started preaching, what was he preaching? The same thing, repent, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. So people are changing and moving toward it, except, of course, these Pharisees. He tells us the fact that the law and prophets are not going to fail till all have been fulfilled with that. The same thought we've got in Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5. I didn't come to destroy the law of the prophets, I came to fulfill it. So. And then we got this verse here on adultery. I can't really tell you why he stuck it here. I can tell you what some other people think. That's the why it's there. He said, now he addresses God's attitude toward the integrity as it relates to divorce and remarriage. Perhaps, I thought, some of these Pharisees had taken advantage of the law's allowance because of the hardness of their heart. Moses allowed divorce, remember, because of the hardness of their heart. God didn't have it from the beginning, but Moses allowed it because of that. So maybe these Pharisees are taking advantage of that, putting away their own wives to marry others or teach others so they can do that in order to gain what they might get out of it from that standpoint. Jesus here is both asserting and exerting his authority, present the will of God, and to keep the righteous leaders of his day of hypocrisy, failure to accept the teachings of the scriptures. Yeah, we talked about hypocrisy before, and these leaders, how it permits them. So, God hates divorce. Some general terms there. This is a verse. Nice and simple, nice and compact. Whoever divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery. Done. Whoever marries her who is divorced from her husband commits adultery. Not hard to understand. Okay? Not hard to understand. Whoever applies broadly to everyone. So it's not a specific group he's talking to. Christians, non-Christians, whoever divorces his wife marries another who is divorced. To put away is to be released. It's used, of course, to dismiss this, to put them out of the house, to repudiate, like the Old Testament, some terms that are used there. To think about the dissolution of a marriage. One who divorces his wife, marries another, commits adultery. And the term there, and I'm not an English major, and I'm sure not a Greek major, I'm told that that's, some of you people help me out, present indicative term usage indicates a continuing action is the point, okay? So, you commit adultery. How long do you commit adultery? As long as you stay in a relationship. That's the point it's making. Okay. Wait just a minute. I look at these other passages. It's very similar type thing. We're familiar with them, I know, but I got a point I'm trying to get to in a minute. Matthew 5, Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said, basically the same thing. His wife, for any reason except sexual immorality, calls her to commit adultery. Whoever marries or wants to divorce commits adultery. That's Matthew's version there. 10, he said to them, whoever divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery against her. Woman divorces her husband and marries another, she commits adultery. And then the longer one in Matthew 19, I want to try to emphasize, I read it here a couple of points. The Pharisees came to him, testing him. I'm talking now to maybe if you those who are teaching next quarter. I'm trying to make a point for you. They're testing him, saying, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for just any reason? He answered and said to them, have you not read who made them in the beginning, made them male and female? He said, for this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother, be joined to his wife. Two shall become one flesh. They're no longer two but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let not man separate. They said to him, why did Moses command to give a certificate of divorce? He said to them, Moses, because of the hardness of your heart permitted you to divorce your wife. But from the beginning it was not so. Okay, 2 points if you're teaching next quarter. You get down to this point here. Teaching of Jesus concerning divorce or remarriage appeals to God's stated intention when he made them male and female. Okay? Matthew 19:4 is read. And to the plan of God from the beginning, Matthew 19:8, in the bringing together one man and one woman for life. So this is when you get to this verse you're teaching, and you want to bring this passage in, there's a lot in the school systems. I don't know how much it is around here. It may not be as much as it is other places, but this thing of no longer male or female, now I have these other gender choices, or I have the fact that I choose no gender. I saw a thing this past week where California has set aside physical fitness tests that was being administered, I think, to 5th, 7th, and 9th graders, set aside for a 4-year study so they can decide the impact negatively it's having on those who identify with other opposite sex and what impact that's having on the other students in this physical fitness test. In other words, I'm a guy who identifies as a girl, and therefore my physical fitness scores are higher than all the girls over here. So what's the impact on the girls for me doing that? Well, California stopped all physical fitness tests before they do a 4-year study to decide the impact of that. We got 2 minutes, 3 minutes to cover rich man and Lazarus. Don't know if we can do that. That's what's next here. A couple slides. This sounds a little complicated when you first read it. Back to the adultery thing a minute. Just as the first husband commits adultery by putting away his wife and marrying another, so the second husband commits adultery by marrying her who is put away. That's the basic point. That's where it gets a little complicated. Note that Jesus does not say that the second husband is free to marry her if the first husband married prior to the second marriage. So he's not saying, okay, as long as the other husband gets married first, then the wife can go marry because he married, and I'm free to marry over here. Not what he says at all with that. The junction "and" clearly indicates that both divorced partners commit adultery, along with their other partners when they remarry. Jesus does not say whoever marries first frees the other. He said that both he and she commit adultery. One who marries before the other, they both commit adultery. So, yes, ma'am.
And I think verse 18 here, I feel like it's not a tangent. I feel like we can parallel it to Romans 7, where he's talking about the law and prophets again. And the new law, and it's that parallel to marriage, that if you're married to one spouse, you can't take on the next spouse until that one has passed away. And so it's the idea, he's talking here about the law and the prophets. You can't take on my new law, my new kingdom, until you let the old law pass away. Until you let it die, you can't take on me. And I feel like that's where he may be going here, instead of, a hypocrisy or anything else, even though that's probably also a thing that we're up to as well.
Yeah, and it's a very good point. Y'all see the point she's making. Apparently, the law and the prophets is talking about before this, right? And that's got to be fulfilled before it's out of the way, and you can't take on and be in my law till that one's gone. That's certainly taught many places there, and it goes right into the divorce and remarriage to talk about that. And the whole thing here, I think, because the very next parable we got put off to Wednesday night behind it, so rich man and Lazarus, which ties right back into the first part of the chapter, with how you handle your physical earthly possessions, which is the problem of the rich man, okay? And so I think the whole chapter ties into this same general thread of how you handle what you've been given on earth. Now, how it comes into handling wives, I'm not quite sure yet, but anyhow. Anyhow. Okay, I knew it was going to probably be behind this morning. There's a lot I want to talk about with this thing here. I think it's a lot of important lessons for us. And we don't think about it on a daily basis. What do we have doesn't belong to us. We're stewards of it. We need to think about that. and we handle it justly or unjustly, and are we using it to prepare for a spiritual hereafter? Okay.